recording.
Yes.
Well, good morning, everyone. Sorry for the slight delay kicking off. Just a sound check. Glenn, can you hear us all good? Yeah, that's great. So we're starting early today just to get Mr. Allen through and away. He needs to be away this morning, and just for those who weren't here yesterday, I wonder whether you could just make yourself known. Maybe stand up and say hello. I'm Stephen Daish, I'm the chair of the hearing, and this is Commissioner McMahon, who's assisting with the decision making. So for those that weren't here, please stand up and say hello. Yeah, Ian Milner, who's a witness. Sir. Okay, Louis. Okay, colleague of James. Yes.
I'm Alice Valena. I'm a resource planner at
Okay, hello.
Roseanne Hayes, resource planner.
Okay, welcome. Yes, so these hearings get to be a bit of a family after a while, but so with a short hearing, 3 days, it's still nice to know who's around and contributing. So and listening in. So welcome everyone. We had decided a rough agenda for this morning, which was that we'd start with Mr. Allen and Mr. Milner on MPS HPL matters. I think we'll just hear from each of you one after the other, and we may have some general questions which we'll put to both of you. Just with two witnesses, that's quite a good way of doing it. But so Ian, maybe if you came up to the front, not hide away in the back there, just so we can do that. Then we were going to go to 4 matters which we'd asked Daniel, you to come back to us on.
Yes.
Have you got something prepared for us?
Correct, yeah, it's just been printed at the moment.
Okay.
So that'll be here shortly. The other piece that could probably be dealt with at the same time as that is a short joint witness statement between Mr. Brents and Mr. Rose on
Yes.
The infrastructure matters.
Yes.
So I think that could be dealt with at the same
At the same time.
And then get back into the
Okay.
traffic matters.
And then we'll get back to the traffic matters. So Mark and Mellon, there you're cut off sort of partway through, but I think in hindsight that was the best thing to do, so everyone's got the same information and can follow the discussion. There is one matter that David and I have talked about for staff. We're pretty interested in the growth planning for this part of Masterton, and we'd like, when you present to us tomorrow, Megan, a chronology of the mugs, you know, how it evolved, a little bit about what the brief was, who did it, how, whether it was shared at all with the community through any consultation process. You've told us already it wasn't an LGA process. Inputs with the submissions on it, when and why it was decided not to proceed with it by council, and same with the draft district plan process, just so we understand what's been out in the community, what the growth planning is, what community inputs there's been. This goes to weight and also to law about whether we can in fact consider that. Already established that some witnesses are relying on some of that information, so it is important. So I can't actually see you go all peer around just to get your reaction. Is that okay, just to put that together for us?
Yes, I would do my best, and it just may be a little bit tricky because it's even time, so we'll see what we can find. But
yes.
Yeah, definitely do our best to get someone.
Okay, but there will be formal records of the back of the council system. So if you could work with the council team and get that together, it just gives us a more complete picture of both planning generally, which does, as I say, go to wait. And we'll also hear from Daniel about how we might be able to take some of that into consideration. So,
Could I just add to this?
yes,
Just Megan, just in terms of that, if you could just touch on the functional relationship between the MUGs and the Wellington Regional Growth Framework, the upper end, just very briefly, and also the relationship between MUGs and the district plan in terms of how the district plan might have been informed by that, to the extent that you can.
right. So James, we're with you.
Thank you, commissioners, and thanks for allowing me to start a little bit early. So I'll read through my summary.
Have we got that summary?
Don't know if we have.
Yesterday, so that was in a bundle of hard copies. So I'll just go through that. We've got one of these. We've got economics, landscape and visual, civil engineering.
I don't have it.
Don't seem to have that, Jacob. I've got everyone else's. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
There's a spare one there, Jacob. I do have a spare here, if anyone else would like one. Okay, thank you.
So the summary of our key conclusions. First has identified the land use capability of the site as 3W1 based on the NZ land use resource index, technically deemed to be highly productive land. Though the soils and other physical characteristics of the site face major constraints on its ability to be utilised for. The site is located in the rural zone, although the residential zone borders the property to the south. The site is approximately 14.78 hectares in size, of which approximately 14.3 hectares are affected in agriculture. The summers are dry and winters are wet, and the soil has a considerable wetness limitation without artificial drainage. The train track runs along the western border, and lifestyle blocks are adjacent to the northern and eastern border. Water is sourced from the town supply and is reticulated around the farm troughs. From soil tests, the soils are deemed to be of suboptimal fertility for both pastoral and agricultural production. From the AgFirst assessment on the site, our key conclusions are: firstly, that the size of the site is not large enough to sustain a pastoral agricultural use of any significance, and its fragmentation from other productive sites mean it cannot be amalgamated to realise economies of scale due to incompatible surrounding land uses. The soil fertility is poor, and to correct this fertility issue would require major investment. And C, the soil has poor drainage and would require significant drainage upgrades. This limitation impedes the soil's versatility and inhibits production of higher value crops, which are generally associated with highly productive soils. Arable, considered a less valuable enterprise, has been trialled on this farm with little success. While pastoral agriculture is considered the best use for the site, this does have limitations due to its small size and fragmentation. The operation has an approximate economic contribution of $560 to $700 per hectare at present, below most operations which occur on highly productive land. For high value land use, specifically horticulture, a water source will also need to be established, as well as possible irrigation infrastructure, and the soil would need to have its fertility improved. This will be a costly exercise. The potential for reverse sensitivity effects from any rural land use are considerable due to the proximity of the urban boundary. The block currently contributes very little to the economy and the wider pastoral agricultural sector. The loss of this production would not have a considerable impact on the agricultural sector. As part of consideration of matters under the NPS HPL, I have also assessed the productive viability of other sites considered by Somerset and Mr. Heath. Of the other sites considered, they were of similar LUC classification or were not appropriate to accommodate a retirement village. In terms of matters of agreement, the statement of evidence by Ian Milner for the Masterton District Council largely confirms my conclusions around limitations of the site. Although our LUC classifications are slightly different, we are aligned that there are substantial limitations to the site for rural uses. The slight difference in classification does not make a material difference. The land is technically classed as highly productive land, but is at the lower end of what is considered highly productive. I agree with Mr. Milner that the limitations to the land are both permanent and unavoidable. In regard to scale, Mr. Milner noted that there were few highly successful, highly productive units within the area due to the presence of lifestyle blocks. I agree with this assessment. In regard to soil fertility, I'd note that to address the fertility problem would be expensive and potentially add to reverse sensitivity, especially given to the proximity to a rural boundary. This was noted to be impractical, especially given the current performance on the block and land use limitations.
Kick off first, David.
I don't have a lot. Okay, thanks, Mr. Allen. That's very clear. It seems that you and Mr. Milner have reached the same conclusion, albeit through slightly different routes. And that different route is through the soil classification. Yours being a soil limitation, yours being a wetness limitation, and his being a soil limitation predominantly. That's my understanding of. Yes.
Mr. Milner's interpretation within there are a higher degree of
yes. Okay. Just wanted to get some clarification on a couple of things along the way. One of the key matters that's come through is that soil fertility is poor and it would require a major intervention and major investment. Can you just elaborate on what that might be and the sort of costs involved?
Just before I start on that, Mr. Milner correctly notes that soil fertility is not necessarily a permanent limitation. It can be corrected. The issues of cost and the time taken to do that and the return. So, in rough numbers, we're talking 14 hectares here. We're going to be looking at in the tens of thousands to bring it up to moderate agricultural use. In terms of substantial horticultural use, I have to make that out.
Yes, and with that, excuse me, presumably that's not just a one-off investment either. That we're talking about the application of fertilisers and.
So you take a capital investment initially, capital fertiliser to correct the initial limitations.
And similarly with the drainage limitations, what sort of works and what sort of capital expenditure would you envisage?
This would be, I would suggest, a more challenging issue to resolve, given the fact that there is limited drainage opportunities surrounding the block and the soil type. You're going to need to suggest undertake some sort of subsurface and overflow drainage, possibly some open drains, and there was some soil decompaction and ripping. So, having said that, that doesn't eliminate the issue that it's a permanent limitation to high value.
Yes, and presumably the direction of travel will be down to the rail corridor area. Would that intervention require continuous attention in terms of ongoing maintenance? And
there would be a degree of ongoing maintenance, certainly. Periodic soils every 5 years, depending on the activity.
yes, but the laying of overflow.
Should be a significant.
Yes. Yes. Only other question I had to you was your paragraph 2.3 of your summary, Mr. Allen. And you were referring to Mr. Milner's observation that there were a few successfully highly productive units within the area, notwithstanding the presence of lifestyle blocks. We've obviously asked Mr. Milner to elaborate on that, but what's your understanding of the significance of that?
So my understanding would be when I look around the surrounding land area and different land uses, there are small areas of grapes or other cultural crops, but typically on more free draining soil and a bit more elevated. So it's not to say it can't be done here, but it's that couldn't be done on this particular block.
Yes.
And in closing, I always like to think, well, farmers and growers are generally quite astute people and tends towards the highest and best use of the land. That block hasn't gone into horticulture until now. Why not?
Yes, and I do have one final question. Relates to paragraph 1.7, where you say, as far as this block is concerned, at least, the loss of any productive capability wouldn't have a considerable impact on the agricultural sector. One of the things we hear in planning a lot, James, is Mr. Allen, is that there's the concept of cumulative impact, and Chair referred to it yesterday about death by 1,000 cuts. I don't know if you've heard that, but you know, whilst it might be possible to square this one away, is there a danger that that the same can be applied to other similar lots, and collectively the impact is greater, the sum of the whole being greater than the parts sort of concept? Any comment on that?
My first comment is that I'm not a planner.
I understand.
But
Lucky you.
I understand totally your point, and my career is based on land use productivity, price out of the land and fashion. So
Yes.
Reduction of available land, of course, is concerned with that. Take this quite seriously.
Yeah.
Having said that, it needs to be put in context and what's appropriate. In my humble opinion, this is some of the worst highly productive land. And if we were talking about a obviously class 1 block here of 40 hectares, I would think something quite different. I think that does have a significant, a reasonable size scale to do something useful.
Yes. Stephen, just strikes me to have one final question. This is an instance where both you and Mr. Milner, through your own investigations, have seemed to have ratified the classification in the land use resource inventory. That isn't always the case, is it? Sometimes the actual field work shows a different outcome to the inventory, presumably.
Correct, sir. You know, the debate internally, was it categorisation we'd come up with, or was the owner come up with? We ended up this one, but it could have been that one. But you're quite correct. while there was a lot of detail applied to that, the mapping process originally, in some cases, due to the coarseness of scale, it's not always totally.
Yes. I'm familiar with in another jurisdiction where the classification has resulted in quite a different classification outside the 1 to 3. It's now in the 4 or 5 range. No question there, just an observation. Yeah. But there's no doubt in your mind that that it is in the class 3 range, and that therefore it triggers the HPL. Yes, it's zone rurally productive. It's class 1 to 3, and the third criteria was.
I'll address you on that in my legal submissions, and that isn't relevant to the interim.
It's not.
Step.
Okay.
It's more when it comes to the
okay.
But that's about the
cohesive nature. Yes, yes, that's right. Okay. Thank you. That's I've exhausted my questions.
Yes, thanks for that, David. Look, I'm going to go a bit deeper than that, just because we don't have a lot of case law, and this is an evolving process. I think it's certainly a great business to be in now, in terms of getting involved in these sort of processes more deeply. Probably prior to HPL, we might not have even seen witnesses of your type and calibre. So, look, I do want to take you through a few just minor things first. In your 1.1, you talk about the soil being technically deemed. Would you agree that it's also legally deemed? I'm not sure what you mean by technically.
Yes, I would agree.
You'd accept that. In your 1.3, you talk about an ag first opinion, which just want to clarify, you're under the code as an expert witness. This is not an ag first opinion, this is your opinion, and you've actually done the work.
So just to clarify, one of my colleagues did the actual initial LMC assessment.
Yes.
So I've prepared this statement in standby.
Okay, so you were involved in planning and reviewing the assessment? Okay, thank you. David's asked some of those questions I had. I would like you and Mr. Milner to help me with a little exercise together. And using the 80-20 rule, give me some rough numbers or some rough task you need to do to bring this crop, this 14 hectares, up to the best productivity, assuming it's used, say, in highest and best use might be first tell me what with intervention and with capital costs might be the highest and best use for this land, or an aspirational use, whether it be viticulture or cropping block, and knowing that you could add in whatever inputs to get there on a capital basis and a maintenance basis. So firstly, what might you look at? Would it be an intensive cropping operation or a viticultural block?
Neither, to be honest.
Yes.
I would stick with my comment around pastoral use.
Pastoral use. Okay, so to make better use of this, what would be the capital functions? Would you have irrigation? Would you have ripping? Would you have drainage? Just let's get a list of things that you could intervene with. Just perhaps work those through.
Making some notes. If it was my block and I was looking to optimise its productive use for pastoral, I'll be looking at fertiliser. I would be looking at some ripping and probably some subsoil drainage.
So that's 3 inputs.
Yes. I would also be considering the infrastructure above the ground and slight intensification in terms of fencing,
Yes,
which means some additional water troughs on the place.
yes.
The yards, I'm not sure there was a reason to the yards. They would be the key ones. I wouldn't be considering irrigation for pastoral use, benefit wise.
Is irrigation actually available? Is there a irrigation supply, or do you?
Couldn't answer that, sorry.
So you're not actually from War? Are you based in Warrappa?
No.
Okay. So Ian, do you know if I know there's irrigation schemes being proposed all up and down Warrappa, but
I think they're in Snowman.
yes. Okay. So no irrigation. So just give me a per hectare idea of, as a capital chunk, to bring this up to the very best or the most optimum you could. So fertiliser, the cost.
Wise. Okay, so in approximate figures, depending on what level we wanted to lift the phosphate and potassium levels to, we might be talking around 10,000, 10 to 15,000 to lift up the fertiliser.
That's for the whole block? Yep.
Could be as high as 20, so fertiliser prices are fluctuating significantly.
Yep.
On top of that, we've got some subsoiling costs, which might cost you around 3,000 to 5,000. Subsurface drainage can be quite expensive, talking 30,000 to 40,000 or more for that.
So the difference to that first number in the subsoil drainage, what was that?
So the ripping.
The ripping, okay. So what I call ripping would be 3 to 5, okay. And then subsoil drainage.
Overflow type.
Yes,
drainage,
yes.
40,000 to 60,000, I think. Rough pricing.
40 to 60k. Yep.
You've got some internal subdivision for your fencing cost, so another 1,000, BC some,
Yes.
and a couple of thousand border troughs.
So can you give me, and Ian, does that sound about right to you?
Yeah, I have no objections to that.
Yep. Okay. So we're looking at a range. If you could actually give us a range on the total of those.
$50,000 to 100,000 would be my
50, 100k.
75.
75 to 100k.
50 to 100,000.
75 in the middle.
Midpoint of 75.
Okay. Now you've given us, the reason I wanted you to do that is you've given us some information about the returns that you might get off this block, 560 to 700 per hectare. Is that like a net return?
That's a net return,
you'd
and
achieve.
based on what it's currently doing, but I would expect that you could increase
Yeah, so that's where I'm going next. So let's say that range now, would you move it up by double or?
Realistically, you should, with good management,
Yes.
that's implicit to
Yes.
making this work, would be double that. Just looking at the average returns for this area. The 3-year average gross margin per hectare for sheep and beef in this area is 14.53 per hectare.
So 14, yeah, so that double that gets us to 14 in terms of the top, 14.53 hectares. So let's do the numbers. So at the moment, 700 times 14 gives us 9,800, and improved would give us double that.
Just under double, yeah.
So roughly 10 and 20k in terms of returns. And that would be, to get that extra return, you'd have to spend that capital and the payback. So that just gives me a feel, probably unlikely to be putting that investment in. Is that your view, just for that type of return?
It's unlikely, given, once again, given this particular locality and surrounding land use and so forth.
Yes.
It's not out of the question, but someone might choose to do that if they had a particular bent.
Yes. And would that net, say 20k for the return for the block, would that take account of some ongoing maintenance, or would that, you'd have to?
So that's a gross margin.
That's a gross margin. The 20 is a gross margin.
So from there, you need to deduct your fixed costs, which will be years and maintenance.
Rates. Maintenance. Yeah. Okay. Not going to get rich on this block, are you? No.
We're not going to retire.
No. Okay. Look, thanks for indulging me on that. Ian, any other comments?
Yeah, my only proviso with that is I'd be highly sceptical with the drainage it's feasible would work.
Yes.
So that could be some capital and it still not work.
Yes. Risky.
Yeah, hugely risky. In which case you'd be looking for other methods to overcome the same issue, and I think the standard pad, which again is probably another magnitude of capital above that.
Yes. Yeah. Look, that's been really helpful, because I know myself that pastoral farming on small blocks isn't very profitable. You really are hobby farming, really, unless this was part of a larger farm, which presumably it was at one time. Presumably,
I believe so.
Yes. So this is the cost of fragmentation of peri-urban land to get to a stage that's just not really useful for serious agricultural production. And I think I'm getting from both of you that this block has that.
This particular
Yes.
block.
Yes. Okay. That's great. I don't have any other questions for you, James. Was there anything else you wanted to, after listening to the discussion, sort of add into our thinking?
No, Commissioners, and thanks for your good questions and insight there. Just wondered, you touched on it at the start yesterday about plan change 73 at Waiuku. I did have some involvement in that. So.
Oh, yes. Yes, okay.
It was raised by Daniel whether you wanted a synopsis of where that's.
Yeah, just tell us what you know about plan change.
73.
That's to the Auckland plan. Yeah.
So once again, this is in layman's terms.
Yes. So,
just in general, that was a 32 hectare site on the immediate boundary of Waiuku. Interestingly owned by 3 separate landowners, so you had 3 titles to deal with, 3 separate land uses in use already. Out of that 32 hectares, approximately 2 hectares was land use class 4, and the balance was classes 1 to 3, with the predominance of land class 2. Of note, it was immediately adjacent to Waiuku, and across the boundary was the Waiuku's high school. The reverse sensitivity issues were significant. In my opinion, it did not have a use for intensive vegetable production, which is commonly associated with that area. And it was of note that it was actually owned by one of the largest horticultural growers in the region, and they've chosen not to crop this particular block either. But nonetheless, it was LUC2 and did have alternative uses such as kiwi fruit or other horticultural options. So that was that hearing was in October, and we had no result of it.
Okay, so was that heard just after the HPL came into force? It's an example of, yeah, okay, that's helpful. So you're still waiting a decision from October.
Correct.
It's pretty efficient decision making, but yeah, okay, that's great. Look, James, it's been really helpful. As I said at the start, we're all learning on the job as we go through this new regime with the HPL. So I think it would be good to move now to Ian. Ian, you've come in at the sort of a reasonably recent into this, and I'd like to thank you on behalf of David and I for making the time to do this, because I think that does add a lot of quality to our decision making that we've got 2 experts in this area. So just summarise briefly what you've done, what you've found, and give us probably the highlights.
Highlights?
Yeah.
Okay, so I visited the site last Friday. A few hours out there digging holes and scratching around the general locality. I compared what I found on site with what I observed on the public available database for the NZ, and in my view, the NZ LRI is correct in saying there's a 3S3. And I'll dwell on this because that S limitation, which is soil limitation, essentially it is very dense clay, about 300 knots. That clay is several things. Probably the most important is that we don't, if you look at the shelter belts on the site, several plant or several trees that have just blown over. Shallow roots. They simply can't get root down deep enough. That clay layer impedes drainage. The option that an opposite layer that also leads to periods of continuous rainfall, which isn't a genuine, just rainfall that's through the sea. In this case, because it's quite site and there are no drainage on it, I would say it would take a long time. So winter conditions. Driving around on Friday, site was pretty spongy still. The distinction between that and a wetness limitation is a wetness limitation is generally found association with a water table, generally down closer to a spring mark. Wetness is attributed to a rising or lowering of the water table seasonally, attributed to occasional flooding. So you might, class 3 might have a flooding risk of 10 years, or class 4 might it's that kind of perspective. Or there's a heated drainage, which is slightly different. The drainage on a wetness limitation means there is still drainage, which means that's important action because there's something about it. Right, so Twyford, silt loams, Bay, silt loams, they're the same thing. Subsurface drainage, in that case pumping, they're able to actually improve the consistency established by. That's an option we don't have. That's made that distinction because I think if we were to run with a wetness limitation at a class 3W, the argument would be completely different in that we seek to remap the site, because when you are allocating a unit, LEC unit to a piece of land, assume that the key limitations, the modifiable limitations, can and will be done. And in this case, we're established in an agreement that the modification, i.e. drainage, can't be done. In which case, you would acknowledge that and say it's probably better classified as class 4. So that's why I'm sticking on that different classification for the different limitations. Notwithstanding, we get to the same point. And when we're talking within the confines of the HPL or NPS, that's permanent limitation. It's part of section 3.10. And it's unavoidable. Now, there are other issues that Mr. Allen's brought up, which in my mind, the minor, and around the fertiliser and things like that. I agree with everything he said about the fertiliser. I don't have an issue there, but the issue is that with the EPS we're talking about a 30-year time frame. Very difficult to sit here in 2023 and say that between year 53 that the opportunity will arise to actually correct it. So I've got to take that into account, but to my mind, it's an issue up to the side because it's a sort of limitation.
Thank you. Dave, did you have any follow-up?
I think I understand what you're saying, Mr. Milner. It seems that that there are characteristics of with the 3S3 classification and the soil limitation that creates some characteristics that you might associate with a wetness limitation.
Yes.
And you talked about the perched wood table, but it's not the reason for the limitation. That's what I'm getting from what you've said.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's a secondary issue, not a problem.
Yes. Yeah. So I guess it's understandable why someone might think there was a wetness limitation because of the soil type, and particularly the dense clay component of the soil.
Yeah, and the reason it's an issue with sticker on here is because we're talking about high productive land.
Yes.
We kind of get a lot.
Yes. You said earlier that you weren't confident that a drainage solution might be successful when it could equate to some sunk capital costs. It was risky. Could you elaborate on that?
To successfully drain that site, you would need to indulge or invest in the kind of capital and methodology that you would commonly see at a sports field, like a high value Eden Park. Where you're introducing sand into the system, you're cutting deep slots down through that clay layer. Yeah. You're filling that up with sand, and you're changing seriously changing the drainage characteristics of the site.
Yes.
Even then, I don't think, unless you replace all that clay, which you can't do, yes. Because I don't think you're still not going to get a root penetration into that clay, because it's. Let me explain how. So. Last Friday I dug a hole. The soil was quite moist, not saturated, but quite moist. So I was able to tap my fingers down on the profile, and my fingers will leave a little dent down to about 300 mils. Like testing a steak. All right, and then I got to the subsoil, and then it's like hitting the bone on the T-bone. Yeah. The contrast was that much. So
about 300 mils, did you say?
Yeah, it's 300, 350. So you're not going to correct that limitation.
Yes. You made a comment verbally about if you're going to remap this land, it might end up as class 4. I may have misinterpreted what you said there, but I wasn't quick enough taking notes. Can you just elaborate on what you said in that
Yes,
respect?
so it's one of the little quirks of the LEC system that where limitations are modifiable or changeable, like erosion, fertilising, drainage. It's assumed that that is done when the classification is first made.
Yes.
Right, so this, this is assumed for argument's sake, it was 3W. Whoever would classify it as 3W would assume that the drainage and fertiliser and those things would be or could be corrected. Right, if you come back later and you reassess it and we say, well, actually the drainage can't be fixed, well then that's an argument for saying it could be class 4.
Yes, okay.
Yeah. And bear in mind that when the LEC system was originally done in the late 70s, early 80s, it's done on a scale of 1 to 50,000 and done quite remotely in many places. So people mapping it would probably never step foot on that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that reclassification of class 4 would only occur if the classification was 3W.
Yes,
Right.
yes, if it was a witness limitation, we'd be in a different conversation.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, that's useful.
Ian, that last discussion, is that clearly set out in your evidence in terms of the way the LUC, just that
I probably mentioned that detail.
that assumption. I wonder whether you could give us a couple of paragraphs on that,
Yep.
written up and provided to us by Megan.
I'll mention it, but I'll elaborate on it.
Yes, I think just some elaboration again, because I think that's really important for us to understand as decision makers what the working assumptions were when that land was mapped.
Yeah.
If that's okay with everyone, I think that would be helpful. Just a little, no more than a page of explanation of that. That would be really helpful. And I did want to ask you about the old days. So I was around in those old days as a young planner when DSI, Soil Bureau and Ministry of Works, the WASCO National, the Water and Soil Division were operating. Yeah, my memory of that time was that there were soil conservators, really knowledgeable soil people operating pretty much in every region. So they were, even though it's mapped at 1 to 50,000, and you went pretty much younger than me, but I'm just trying to think back. You said a lot of that might have been done remotely, just from aerial photos or something.
Yeah, so I was fortunate that my first employer at HBRC back in the day was Garth Isles, who was running that process.
Yes.
The whole XLRI process.
Yes.
So he taught me how to do that for CACs, as it were.
Yes.
And effectively, you get two aerial photos. You apply a stereograph, which is something they developed through World War II.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
And it brings up a three-dimensional image out of aerial photos. And you sit there with a chalk pencil and you sketch your lines on the aerial photo, then you transpose that onto a translucent piece of paper, and then you go and try and ground truth it.
Yes.
So, but in most cases, because they're in such a hurry, they would drive down the road and see whether that was their ground treatment.
Yes.
They might occasionally get out and do the hole just to check that the soil type assumptions were correct.
Yes.
But if your paddock was behind, not observable from the road or behind a hill,
Yes.
they probably would not.
Okay. So those current LUC maps that are locked into the MPS HPL, 1 to 50,000, those were done during that process in the 70s and 80s?
It's the same data set.
Same data set. Okay, that's really good. Thank you. All right, well, I think we've probably exhausted that topic. I want to thank you both for doing the work, attending, and it's been a really, really helpful discussion. And Ian will wait to get through you that little explanation about the working assumptions behind the way the mapping's been done. Really the key thing for me is that they were assuming that the mitigations would have been done to solve the limitations, and that's how they mapped it. Yeah. Okay, thank you. And safe travels both. Yes. Right.
Excellent. I wonder if we move on to traffic and then follow on that, try to provide those further
Okay.
solutions, if that's okay.
That's good. Okay.
And at that following traffic as well, the infrastructure perspective, so speaks about the statement.
After the traffic. Yes, let's do that. So we're hearing both Mark and Melanie together. So yes.
So last night, Mr. Georgeson got midway through his summary statement.
Yes.
And so intend that he completes that. Ms. Nielsen addresses you in terms of her summary statement, and then following that, questioning the witnesses.
Before you kick off, I've been thinking about this overnight, and I should know the question, but I'll ask you anyway, Mark. For both Welhom and Wakakitahi, we've got two experts. One's focusing on transport, one's focusing on safety. Is that, I don't know, I'm just interested in the technical differences between the two witnesses that you have. If you could explain that.
So I'm more particularly looking at, maybe best describe it as the traffic numbers side of things and that analysis, whereas Melanie is more focused on the particulars of road safety.
Okay.
And DSIs, those sort of
Yes.
things.
Yes. Okay, so is it because you don't have the training to do this road safety? I'm just trying to get the expertise clear in my head.
Melanie is more of a road safety practitioner.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. And Melanie, just checking that you're there and listening in. Okay, there you go. Thank you. Right, will you tell us where you're up to? I've got some markings on here, but I think we were around 110 or something like that, 111.
I believe we might have concluded
111.
The first section and just started into
two. Okay, yes, thank you.
If we need to, I can dial back into the map and so on again if we want to do more of a
okay.
On any of the particular areas and so on. But,
yes. Just to let you know, we went and had another drive around and walk around yesterday on the back of your analysis and description on the mapping yesterday. So we've done it was really good to go back and have another look, wasn't it, David, based on the geography. So I think we've got it pretty clear, but if there's anything in particular, we will dial up the plan again.
Sure. Starting back in there at 2.1. Mr. Connolly says in paragraph 66 of his evidence that the default cipher parameters are likely to be an appropriate starting point for intersection analysis. I agree and confirm that I've adopted the default parameters in my analysis. Performance statistics reported in the ITA in figure 8.8 and that I have summarised in paragraph 7.5 of my primary statement are the relevant outputs and demonstrate good ongoing performance of the priority intersection. Mr. Connolly mentions in the same paragraph that good practice is for the existing gap acceptance behaviour to be surveyed to inform calibration of the traffic models. I agree, but in this instance and other similar ones, found that because existing volumes are low and delays in queues are small, sample measurements of gap selection are elusive. My A&P model of the existing intersection reports a 95th percentile queuing of less than one vehicle with a right turn out, and that's consistent with my own observations of no instances more than one vehicle waiting to turn right out of Cashmere Oaks Drive. I note the comment given by Mr. Connolly at paragraph 93 that a roundabout at this location may not be the only solution. And earlier at paragraph 70, that the priority intersection may operate satisfactorily. I agree, and have demonstrated that the intersection will continue to function without the need for a roundabout to be established. Turning to other modes in terms of buses, I agree with Mr. Connolly at paragraph 122, where he states that the proposed development should be considered with a broader view and that bus services and connections should be led by the council. As set out in section 11 of my primary statement of evidence, further consideration and assessment can be given to that matter at the time of resource consent. I acknowledge that connectivity for pedestrians and cyclists continues to be developed. I accept that currently pedestrians and cyclists connecting through to Miro Street need to access out to State Highway 2 before travelling further south. And the next point is what I walked through yesterday. I'm aware of the discussions with council that a future connection may involve a pathway in the rail corridor where pedestrians and cyclists would be able to travel from the southern end of Cashmere Oaks Drive to Oxford Street, or the established pathways and bridge across the Waipoua River.
I do have a question on that, and it's worth breaking. That's hearsay evidence. Do you have anything you could provide us that backs up that discussion?
I need to come back to you on that. I just need to check whether I've got an email exchange with the council on that.
Okay. So Daniel, I think that's quite important. We certainly can't take that on board unless there's verification. We can give it the weight that Mark's had those discussions, but probably need a little more certainty about those ideas and those plans.
And I do make the point in my next paragraph here that there's currently no planning or funding set aside for that.
So no LTP funding or planning or.
Correct.
Okay.
And I say that it presents an obvious extension.
Yes.
As part of the active mode network. But at this stage there is no investment or program.
So nothing you can pin your head on and rely on as a certain outcome.
As a certainty, correct.
Okay.
And just to clarify, there's nothing that we are seeking to absolutely rely on that. It's simply Mr. Georgeson identifying it as a possible opportunity.
All right. Yes.
In terms of the path along State Highway 2, I accept that the 200 metre section between Cashmere Oaks Drive and 4th Street is built with a width of about 1.5 metres and is substandard as a shared facility. There is the opportunity for this path to be widened and for a crossing point of State Highway 2 to be established in the 50 km/h location of 4th Street. And again, that's what I walked through yesterday and mirroring the kind of crossing point that exists south of 3rd Street. And that would enable pedestrians and cyclists to cross the road and access the paths on the eastern side of State Highway 2 and avoid doing so in the Cashmere Oaks intersection where there's no connection to the existing paths down the embankment below the road. This would, in my view, be one of a series of additions to the location that would benefit the community as a whole. It can be identified and assessed through the subsequent resource consent process and considered alongside other improvements, such as may prevail within the rail corridor and what might be progressed in the interim. Turning to 3.1, from the evidence of miss and demand, note the reference made in paragraph 6.3, 6.4 and 6.5 of Waka Kotahi's approval in 2009 of the State Highway 2 Cashmere Road Drive intersection being satisfactory for all development within the Opaki development area, as it was defined at the time, shown by the plan attached to the December letter 2009 engineer's statement. It might just be useful to point to that as I've referenced it.
Yes. So we should get
say demands.
appendix 1.
So the appendix 1 has a letter dated 22 December 2009.
Yes, I have that. David, we'll just wait for David to find that.
I've got it.
Yes.
Okay. The reasonably short letter, and there's 5 points on that. Point 3 refers to what was then described as the Opaki Future Development Area, and talks about a copy being attached. The next plan on the following page attaches that diagram.
Yes.
Now, I know it's a little bit difficult to see, but the extent of that Opaki growth area at the time is outlined with a bold line.
Yes, see that.
And incorporates the plan change site. The other points of the Transport Agency as it was at the time, the point 5 talks about their approval, points 4 and 5, subject to lots having an average size of 1,200 metres, and relating to that extent of area shown in that plan. So then, just back to my evidence and the points that I'm making about that, 3.2, I acknowledge the caveat on the approval that the average lot density did not exceed the district plan activity requirement of 1,200 square metres. And I'm simply making the observation that the development area considered by Waka Kotahi at the time incorporated the subject land and its traffic generation connecting to Cashmere Oaks Drive. At an average lot size of 1,200 square metres versus the residential zone standard of 400 square metres, inclusion of a plan change site would translate to about a third of the traffic generation I have assessed for scenario 1. My understanding of the Cashmere Oaks subdivision as it's continuing to be developed is that there is a range of established lot sizes within that subdivision at the moment, ranging 500, 800 and up to 1,500 square metres. And I understand that the average size within Cashmere Oaks is around about 1,200 square metres. So turning to 3.3, as I understand it, paragraph 6.8, turning down to Ms. Spake's evidence now, suggests that increasing development densities in the conditions referring to the current Opaki future development area might be a better option than extending the residential zone further out. This would be better for planning and investment for infrastructure. And I make the note that this outcome would still rely on traffic accessing the area via Cashmere Oaks Drive at an intersection of traffic outcomes that are different from those associated.
Mr. Georgeson, just while we're on that point, and just want to get a feel for the reduced and now current OPAC future development area, by reference to the plan that was attached to this farmer's evidence. Are you able to assist in that sense?
So I've got the plan that I was just referring to previously.
Yes.
Yes.
So I take it from your 3.3 that area has now reduced in size since 2009.
Correct.
And
So,
do you know the boundaries of that now current and reduced area?
in the current plan, my understanding is that it's to the northern extent of Cashmere Oak subdivision.
Yes.
So, the top square, if you like,
Yes.
on that plan,
Yes.
is not part of the zoning at the moment, but that area has been reintroduced in the draft district plan. And to a wider extent, out to State Highway 2.
Okay, I might get you to mark up that plan and submit it so there's no confusion in the interval, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind at all. Are you clear on that? What David's asked for?
So I can mark that up with two, one to reflect how that's changed back to the current zoning.
Yes.
And how zoning in the draft district plan.
Yes.
Is,
Yes. That's exactly it.
Okay. While we're here, and this is probably a signal for you, Catherine, when you come on, I was interested to know the source of this page out of it's either evidence or a report that's attached to your Appendix 1, and also note that there's a working assumption that the minimum average will be 700 metres per lot when you actually read the text under the plan. So whether that's relevant or not in paragraph 1, just whether you've got any comments or knowledge about that, Mark, and then, yeah, Catherine, hello.
Good morning.
Yes, yeah, so maybe just picking up those points on the way through so we've got some context.
Yes, absolutely. I can actually provide some detail around the background to the Waka Kotahi approvals over time for the Cashmere Oaks area, and I think that might be quite informative to the commissioners if you would like me to present that. Yes,
well, let's do that when you come on with your evidence, I think, but just to flag that, that appendix, that history is quite important. There's been an evolution, so we'll have a talk to you about that when you give your evidence.
Yes, that sounds good.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.
Right.
So was it 3.5?
Yes.
I note the point made by Ms. Spain in her paragraph 718 that while consultation on the ISMP is complete, further consideration of speed management within the corridor can be progressed through the speed management plan time cycle, which is produced for the 2024 to 27 period. So the consultation for this and consideration of the speed limits is planned for May to June this year. So my understanding of that process is that it presents a next mechanism for further doing consideration of speed limits within the corridor beyond what is intended through the ISMP.
And when you say beyond, is that both in terms of actual speed and also the spatial extent of any speed restriction, or is it just the latter?
I think it's as a full supplementary process to the ISMP.
Yes. So might it particularly look at the 120, 150 metre gap between that we discussed yesterday, south of Cashmere Oaks Drive?
Yeah. My understanding is that that's the mechanism to be doing it.
Okay.
Through that mix.
Yes.
So that through the ISMP, the proposed 80km/h change, which related to that whole 8 km section from Cashmere Road
north
through the bypass
yes.
road, is implemented in beyond that. There's another process that can be undertaken to further. And my personal view, and as I described and touched on yesterday, is that it's relevant to consider that 600 odd metre length of State Highway 2 from Cashmere Oaks to the corner.
Yes.
My view is that section of highway should be looked at differently compared to the section of highway further north.
Yes. When you say the corner where the 85 speed advisory sign is.
Arvida corner.
Yes. Okay. So that's the answer to speed in relation to the area that was covered by the ISMP. Second question I have is the area to the south of Cashmere Oaks Drive, which is the 120 to 150 metres between the 50 and the currently 100, but proposed to be 80. That sort of stands out in my view as something that may need to be considered as part of this speed management plan process.
Correct, and I'm unsure how Wakakatahi might approach and consider that, as to whether it is that short section or whether it is that section up to the corner. But my view is that the way in which that section of road between the posted speed limit and to the bend,
yes,
the way it functions, how people behave when they drive that piece of road is of a peri-urban standard in that transition area, and certainly not of a rural standard.
Okay, thank you.
Turning to traffic generation rates at line 36, in paragraph 49B, Mr. Connolly refers to a published traffic generation figure for outer urban dwellings of 0.9 vehicles per hour and suggests that my calculated rates are low. I note that the 0.9 figure comes from a sample size of just one and dates back to beyond 2011 when the research report was published. As stated by Mr. Connolly in paragraph 50 of his evidence, the derived rate I have used to present data relative to the location provides a good indication of traffic. I do not believe the trip rates need to be used with caution as he suggests. Mr. Connolly in paragraph 54 of his evidence then agrees with the traffic generation rates I have used for the retirement village. Mr. Connolly notes in paragraph 67 that the delays could be expected to be higher than latest figures. I appreciate that modelling is exact science and there will be variable around the stated outputs. Even then, I do not believe this will be significant given the base.
Mark, I'm going to ask the other witnesses this question too. We know modelling's a tool, it's never accurate. The only thing we know is that any modelled output is certainly probably wrong. What orders of magnitude would you put around the accuracy of this? Is it plus or minus 10%, 20%?
Look, my view is that two parts to that. One is that we're starting with a low base in terms of how well the intersection performs today. the traffic conditions that have been applied to the intersection demonstrate to me that we are still in the realms of a lower base scenario where delays and queues are small. So that to me suggests that we are in the realms of the variabilities around plus or minus 10%.
Okay.
Kind of order.
Yes.
That that level of variability is something that's actually referred to in the published ITA guidelines. Now, I'm just touching on that because one is that there is industry guidance
Yes.
to the transportation industry about how to prepare integrated transport assessments, and it has an indicator in there about risk and sensitivity testing and things like that, where it has it suggests that if the variability might be in the order of plus or minus 10%, then there doesn't need to be a degree of caution applied or a degree of sensitivity and so on undertaken with that possible variability.
Okay, no, that's helpful, and I'll certainly be following it up, because as decision makers we do all sorts of modelling, and that level of certainty in the modelling is quite often very very high. So I would have put plus or minus 10% as high certainty, and we therefore as decision makers we can get the realm. So, some modellers tell me their modelling's plus or minus 50%, and they're very upfront about that, which is good, because they just don't know. So
one of the reasons that I'm more confident at that other level is because we have used more precise data relating to the location.
Yes.
It hasn't been informed by other averages from other locations.
Yes.
So volumes on the highway, the turning volumes at the intersection have all been surveyed and provide a good indication of what that starting position is to give us confidence in that initial model that we can use to future predictions.
Okay, thank you. So your 3.8 covers it off, doesn't it?
Yes. Sensitivity testing.
Yes.
3.8. I accept the sensitivity testing is appropriate in some instances, but again, in this case, given the low base and good result achieved of the tested scenarios, I am of the view that the risk of resulting outcomes and conclusions changing is small, requiring further. In terms of other modes, there is an existing and expanding network of connectivity for people who choose to travel by other modes. The existing built and under construction network of footpaths provide for future residents of the site to connect with others in the community and south towards the Masterton Township, either via links through the new subdivision roads, and I point to what is being called Road 3 there. Road 3, I can point to a diagram, but Road 3 is the one that has the built cul-de-sac on, that has the shed park.
Okay, gotcha. Yep.
If you can
Yes.
visualize that.
Yes. So that last one.
Mr. Connolly mentions in paragraph 117 that the footpaths from the end of Coronary Place to Nero Street are not really apparent, intuitive or direct. Now, Coronary Place is...
Yeah, let's get the plan back up. Yeah. Got a mouse, yep, you got a mouse working, you can give us a, there we go.
So just to reorient again, at Cashmere Oaks, intersecting this highway here. Corrally Place, which is referred to, is this existing road down here, and it's got a newly built extension of it.
Yes.
There is then a meandering footpath between that, and it's, I'm not sure whether you've walked through there at all, but the meandering path connection between those two cul-de-sacs. That is the Corrally Place
Gotcha.
that Mr. Connolly refers to.
Yes.
And the Max mentioned that connection is not really apparent, intuitive or direct. Now, that's different to the location that I'm referring to, which is the one off the end of this is Road 3 here.
Yes.
And the path that you're aware of that has recently been completed.
It's quite wide too, so you could handle cycles as well.
Correct.
Could be
about
joint.
2.5 metres wide as a built path, and then it's got a fairly wide, something close to 2.5 metre grass berm on it as well.
Okay.
Up against that close bordered fence.
Okay.
There's a photograph from Mr. Lewandowski's statement of that, yes.
So my view is that link is very intuitive and direct in terms of them connecting up through the Cashmere subdivision to the site.
Can we just stay on this for a while, because I want to ask you a couple of questions which relate to the cycling and walking, let's call it opportunity that's currently there. Is someone, and just probably the first question is about your comment about Mr. Connolly saying it's not intuitive. Someone who does enjoy walking around homes and places where I live, people that live in an area, is it your experience that they'd sniff out walking opportunities like this pretty quickly if they were interested in walking and pathways and connections? Yes. So given the nature of lifestyle, let's say people that are in that area of lifestyle living in a village like this, these are people that might really want to go for a quarter of an hour, 20 minute, half an hour walk just in their local neighbourhood. That's a fair working assumption.
It's certainly a real thing.
Yes, that's the thing. Okay, so just within the immediate area, I just wanted to understand sort of the loops that people might walk in. So if the village was developed, they could walk through the current developing subdivision in a bit of a loop around what perhaps.
Well, for example, I
Yes.
guess what one could be, seeing my hand,
Yes.
yep,
Yes.
down through this internal network, through
Yes.
the new link here,
Yes.
down in the extension of Mero Street,
Yes.
through here, up Corrally,
Yes.
and then back up to the subdivision again.
Yes.
Another wider connection might be down through here, down onto Mero Street,
Yes.
around and up the highway.
So there is a current walking path up there,
Correct.
as you told she said. So that's a bigger loop.
Yes.
Okay.
And obviously there'll be more micro loops within the extended residential area to the north as well.
Okay. No, that's useful. Thank you.
And so last page, 3:11, and you'll hear from Mr. Lewison next, but I'll just pick out the key themes there from her evidence and just note them here that State Highway 2 in the vicinity of Cashmere Oaks does not have the look and feel of a rural road, but rather it's a highly modified environment, and increasingly more so, that can be regarded as having a peri-urban context. Crash modelling presented by Waka Kotahi uses national averages and a blunt tool to predict crashes at this location, which are not substantiated by the historical safety record of the location and the wider Masterton district. These figures are therefore not site specific. Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection with State Highway 2 can continue to operate safely as a priority intersection and does not need to be rebuilt as a roundabout. There's a package of improvements that can be further developed with resource consent time in response to satisfying safety assessment matters in combination with any speed changes in the corridor that may be progressed separately by Waka Kotahi. I add to these the pedestrian and cycle improvements I have referred. And in summarising, while a reduced speed limit on State Highway 2 will better reflect the existing peri-urban context of State Highway 2 north and Masterton, past Cashmere Oaks, it remains my view wholesale infrastructure changes are not needed to respond to the effects of residential development enabled by land change. I nonetheless support Waka Kotahi's continued progress of speed limit in the corridor and to be considered alongside future resource consents.
Thank you. David, I think the way we've been asked to look at this is to now hear from
Yes,
Melanie, and then we can ask questions, and there may be both experts may have opinions on the same.
I think that's a good idea
question.
because maybe that otherwise we'll ask the wrong expert the wrong question. So
Certainly, so I've got a short summary statement from Ms. Nielsen and read out some comments on the or response to the evidence.
Great. Thank you.
So I'll close out of this.
I think I've got a copy already, Jacob.
yes, I've got a copy.
Yes. It's like we're good round, and that these have all been circulated now, haven't they?
Correct.
Yes. Thank you.
Right.
Melanie, welcome.
Hi. Thank you, Commissioners. Right, well, we'll start with this summary, key conclusions. Hopefully you can hear me okay there.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Great, thank you. My road safety assessment relates to the proposed private plan change to rezone approximately 14.7 hectares of land on the northern fringe of the Masterton Township.
I might just break there. Can everyone else hear? Because we're just hearing from a computer. So is that clear enough? Mods? Yep, all good. Carry on. Yep.
It's probably okay for people online. My evidence included assessment of the intersection against the safe system treatment philosophy. I outlined that I consider the collective risk at this intersection is towards the lower end of the scale, low to or low dash medium, which is reflective of the moderate traffic volumes passing on State Highway 2. I consider the personal risk to be medium due to the speed environment on State Highway 2, noting that actual speeds are around 80 kilometres per hour, which is lower than the posted speed limit of 100 kilometres per hour. Also, these risk ratings would typically be based on crash frequency, and there have been no intersection type crashes reported at the intersection. For an intersection with a low, medium collective risk and a medium personal risk, a safety management approach is an appropriate response under the safe system treatment philosophy. The level of risk does not reach the levels where safety transformation, such as a roundabout, is required. In summarising safety management treatments, reducing vehicle speeds is one of the most commonly adopted measures under a safety management approach. Waka Kotahi plans to implement a reduced speed limit of 80 kilometres per hour on State Highway 2 from Cashmere Oaks Drive to the north through its interim State Highway Speed Management Plan. Somerset submitted on this plan that it would be appropriate to extend the 50 km/h zone by approximately 600 metres to north of the Arvida Retirement Village site. It is likely a speed limit change will be in place prior to any development on the site, although development on the site would not depend on this as outlined by Mr. Georgeson. Irrespective, in my view, it would be appropriate to reassess the safety and operation of the intersection at the time of any future subdivision or retirement village resource consent. I outlined a range of other measures which would be considered supporting treatments under the Safe System framework, including speed limit reduction, change in a priority control from give way to stop on the Cashmere Oaks Drive approach, additional intersection warning signage, vegetation trimming and lighting upgrades, which I consider would further enhance the safety of the intersection. The requirement for such measures can be considered at the subdivision and resource consent stages. I consider that while collective risk remains relatively low given forecast traffic volumes on State Highway 2, a safe system transformation approach is not justified as the risk rating is well below the high risk threshold. A transformational treatment, such as a change in the form of the intersection, for example to a roundabout, is disproportionate to the risk and would not be necessary. To conclude, my opinion is that the existing T intersection with a right turn bay will remain the appropriate intersection form together with the supporting treatments described. In terms of matters of agreement, Mr. Connolly states in paragraph 79 that the ultimate form and function of the intersection should be considered in context and integrated with the future development and road network, with safety being a key consideration. I agree with the statement on the basis that the safety and operation of the intersection in relation to the wider corridor and future speed management should be reassessed at the time of any future subdivision or retirement village resource consent. In terms of model limitations, I agree with Mr. Lyndon Lang's statement in paragraph 36 with regard to the crash prediction models being a best guess at likely outcomes and not every intersection will perform as expected. So that's reiterating Mr. Georgeson's comment about the blunt approach and using national averages, and I will talk about that more. In terms of the key outstanding issues, specifically with regard to the State Highway 2 Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection safety risk assessment. The safety risk assessment for this intersection is referenced from Waka Kotahi's Megamat, which assesses a 9 kilometre section of State Highway 2 extending from Cashmere Oaks Drive in the south to Pairau Road in the north, noting that Pairau Road is the northern outlet for the heavy vehicle bypass of the Masterton town centre. The northern section from north of the Arvida development access is in accordance with the definition of the One Network Framework road classification of interregional collector. However, the section of State Highway 2 from the Arvida development south to the existing urban boundary does not look or feel open, nor gives drivers the visual cues that they can travel at high speeds due to the presence of intersections, painted flush medians, right turn bay, and visibility of buildings from the highway. With the increase in development in this area, combined with the presence of the Hansel's factory and 2 side roads providing access to residential developments, particularly to the north of Cashmere Oaks Drive, this section of State Highway 2 is demonstrating peri-urban characteristics. So Waka Kotahi's One Network Framework detailed design document defines peri-urban roads as providing access to residential property and rural settlements, lifestyle blocks, subdivisions, and on the edge of urban areas where the main surrounding land use is residential, but at a lower level than that found in urban residential locations. There are low levels of local street activity with residents going about their daily lives. Levels of motor vehicle traffic and freight will range from very high to low, depending on whether the peri-urban road is connected to an interregional connector or rural road. Therefore, the 750 metre road section from the existing Masterton urban boundary, so that's where the 50-100 signs are currently located, 150 metres south of Cashmere Oaks intersection, to immediately north of the Arvida development cannot be compared to an interregional collector, which is defined as running through farmland and natural areas where there are low levels of roadside activity. Table 2 of Mr Connolly's evidence summarises the latest speed survey results from November 2022. This survey confirms that the average and 85th percentile speeds on State Highway 2 south of the Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection range between 63.4 and 65.4 kilometres per hour and 74 kilometres per hour respectively. While the average and 85th percentile speeds on State Highway 2 north of Pencils range between 80 to 82.4 kilometres and 90.7 to 93.2 kilometres respectively. Mr Connolly states in paragraph 100 of his evidence that State Highway 2 has the appearance of a rural road and there's no definition or change of environment from Cashmere Oaks Road to the north. I disagree, as the road environment changes from being open with views of farmland and rural residential land uses. As the driver approaches Masterton from the north, the road changes with the view of the Arvida development facing the highway, followed by the Hansel's factory and existing Cashmere Oaks development. The trees and footpath on the western side of Cashmere Oaks Drive, south of Cashmere Oaks Drive, also provide drivers' cues to the additional development in the area. There is clear delineation between this area, which corresponds to the peri-urban definition, and the section to the north, which is clearly rural, and the speed survey results demonstrate the visual cues are influencing the driver speeds in this section. I'll move on to the analysis of the crash data. The crashes are random events, and this is supported by Waka Kotahi's definition of a crash being a rare, random, multi-factor event preceded by a situation in which one or more persons failed to cope with their environment. The crash prediction models used by Mr. Landon Lane to assess DSIs, deaths and serious injuries, have been developed on the basis of a site having an underlying crash risk. I'll just step you through the definition of crashes. The Waka Kotahi Guide to Treatment of Crash Locations defines the crash types as follows. Fatal is a death occurring as a result of injuries sustained in a road crash within 30 days of the crash. Serious injury is an injury which could be a fracture, concussion, severe cuts or other injury requiring medical treatment or removal to and retention in hospital. For minor, it's an injury which is not serious but requires first aid or which causes discomfort or pain to the person injured. And a non-injury is property damage only. The deaths and serious injury casualty equivalents, DSIs, are an estimation of the number of deaths and serious injuries likely to occur at an intersection or on a corridor based on the number of injury crashes. So the fatal, serious, minor injuries that have occurred. The reported crash data in the Waka Kotahi crash analysis system was interrogated for T intersections on 80 kilometre and 100 kilometre per hour roads in the Masterton district. And this resulted in finding 6 fatal, 18 serious, 64 minor and 107 non-injury crashes. And that works out to a DSI of 27% of those total injury crashes. And this is since crash records have been inputted into this database, which is around circa 1980. So it's many thousands of crashes that we're looking at there. When you distill it down to just looking at the T intersections on the state highway network in the Masterton district, there have been 2 fatal, 3 serious, 20 minor and 21 non-injury crashes. And that relates to 20% DSIs. Interestingly, it seems that the state highway T intersections are performing better as a subset of all T intersections within the Masterton district. If we take the reported crashes on the state highway T intersections over the last 10 years, so bringing it back to sort of more recent times, there have been 0 fatal, 1 serious, 5 minor and 17 non-injury crashes, equating to 50% of DSIs. The resulting DSIs from the above data interrogation demonstrate that the T intersections on state highways in the Masterton district are performing better than the DSI severity factor of 32% of all injury crashes that occur at priority T intersections on 80-kilometre and 100-kilometre roads. This value is based on the national data from CAS. So these lower DSIs are due to the function of this section directly relate to the function of this section of State Highway 2 operating more as a peri-urban road with a lower average and 85th percentile speeds and more activity along this section. With regard to the crash prediction modelling, we use the Waka Kotahi crash prediction tool from the Crash Estimation Compendium for a priority T intersection in a high-speed environment. So that's anything over 80 kilometres per hour or over in terms of posted speed limit. This equates to 0.18 injury crashes per year for the State Highway 2 Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection, which is approximately one crash every 5 years. Applying the severity factor results in a prediction of approximately 1 DSI per 20 years. This aligns with Mr. Landon Lane's analysis presented in paragraph 53 for scenario 2 mixed scenario development. I have further investigated the crash prediction models for both the existing and future intersection forms using the Crash Estimation Compendium crash prediction models and tested against the roundabout for both the high speed, so it's greater than 70 kilometre per hour, and low speed, which encompasses the 50 and 60 kilometre per hour options. The results are presented in table 1. A 2% per annum traffic growth has been applied for the State Highway 2 traffic volumes over the 20-year period, and the assumption has been made that the high of the 2 scenario future traffic volumes on Cashmere Oaks Drive have been applied to those future years, so a more conservative analysis. And as we can see in that table, we do have the predicted DSI equivalents at year 20 with without development in the second column and with the development traffic in the third column. So what we're looking at in the for the priority T 80-100 kilometre per hour is our existing intersection as it would behave with the current, without the development volumes, but with inherent growth in the state highway network at year 20. So we're allowing for growth, but we're not allowing for the development. And then the column next to it is with if we put in the development volumes. And so I've tested that with a priority T at a lower speed, and then looked at the roundabout at the two the high and low speed scenarios. So naturally the DSIs do increase, but if I go to 3.19, the Waka Kotahi Crash Estimation Compendium states that the model parameters need to be adjusted to given the overall downward trends in crashes, and because many of the crash prediction models predict crashes over 5 years rather than 1 year. The Waka Kotahi Monetised Benefits and Cost Manual provides a methodology for applying a crash trend adjustment factor to take into account those downward trends in crashes since 1985. And this is provided in Appendix 2 on page 285 of the Monetised Benefits and Cost Manual. A snapshot of the equation that we use is on the next page. And this is something that we would use when we are looking at evaluating a site to produce a benefit cost ratio and look at the economic feasibility as well. So when we apply those crash adjustment factors to the models from table 1, the resulting DSIs are reduced as shown in table 2 below. So it does have an impact on those DSI equivalents. for all the scenarios that I have tested there. So the difference in the cumulative DSIs between the high-speed priority T intersection with and without the proposed development traffic volumes, should the speed remain at 100 or be reduced to 80 kilometres per hour, is 0.51 DSI versus 0.85 DSI in 2043, so 20 years out. I note that Mr. Landon Lane has not applied this crash trend adjustment factor in his DSI analysis. A high-risk intersection is often identified as one with 3 or more death or serious injury crashes in 5 years. The high-risk intersections guide states that high-risk intersections are defined as having a high or medium-high collective and personal risk. This is not the case with the Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection with State Highway 2, either in its existing state or as predicted for the future. The crash prediction models provide a theoretical analysis that is based on national averages for crashes for the different intersection types obtained from the reported crash data from the CARES database. However, the analysis is not specific enough to accurately evaluate the impacts of changes at an intersection which has unique characteristics when compared to a national average. With regard to improvements to the Cashmere Oaks Drive intersection, Mr. Connolly states that in paragraph 93 that a roundabout at this location may not be the only solution. This statement reiterates that there are measures that could be implemented to address safety concerns at this intersection. I reiterate the range of other measures that could be considered supporting treatments under the Safe System framework, including speed limit reduction, changing the priority control from give way to stop on Cashmere Oaks Drive approach, additional intersection warning signage, vegetation trimming and lighting upgrades, which I consider would further enhance the safety of the intersection. The requirement for such measures can be considered at the subdivision and resource consent stages. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. I think traffic engineers use more summary sort of documents and different names and mechanisms than planners do. So forgive us as there's so many different manuals and techniques you use. It does take us a bit of a while to work that through, but thank you so much for explaining that, both of you, so clearly, and your summary statements are helpful, particularly as you're thinking through the evidence that's come through from the Waka Kotahi experts as well, and we can look at that in the round, as we will later on with them. David, I'm just checking how many questions you might have, because I've got quite a few, and whether we want to take a break now, or I'm thinking we've probably got about half an hour to work through.
Yeah, why don't we take the break now and we can discuss that?
Yes, I think we'd like to discuss perhaps a questioning sequence. So let's take a break now. It's 10:53. If we're back online at 11:10, that gives us a 15-minute break. Thank you.
Today you've got use of the bar as a breakout room and there's water placed in there for you.
Is the taps working?
Unfortunately, just the water. But yeah, through those double doors you can have some privacy.
Okay.